Reading through the Bible in 1 year, January 15th, Genesis 19, Nehemiah 4, Matthew 13, 1 through 30, and Acts 11, 19 through 12, 5. Two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, bowed himself with his face to the earth, and he said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet, then you may rise up early and go on your way." I said, "No, we'll spend the night in the town square." But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." No means basically they want to rape them. And Lot went out to the men at the answer and shut the door after him and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you. And you do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they said, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out groping for the door. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against it, against its people, has become great before the Lord. The Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law who were to marry his daughters, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to be, to his sons-in-law, jesting. I thought he was joking about it. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, and the Lord being merciful to him, that's why he was doing this, and he wasn't going to wipe him away with the city. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought him out, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away." Lot said to them, "No, my lords. Behold, your servant has found a favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." He said to him, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city for which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing until you arrive there." Therefore the name of the city is called Zoar, which means little. Now, quickly thinking about this, imagine that today you live in some city. I don't know. Well, I'm not going to go for the obvious ones. Like, we'll just pick some random city, like Littleton, Colorado, right? That happens to be near me. It's not that big of a city, but whatever. So if you were the one person who lived in that city, right? And you went to your friends. Now let's go for one that makes more sense to this. Let's say you're in San Francisco, right? And you are the one righteous person who lives there, you and your wife. And you have angels who come to you and say, "We're going to wipe out the city." And you were told, "Leave, get out, get as far as Sacramento or further. Just keep going." By the way, Sacramento's pretty far. It takes some time to get there. We'll put it that way. And you go to your friends and you tell them, "God's going to destroy the city. We have to get out now." How many of them would leave with you? Right? Anyway, so the sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, the term looking back in this case isn't just that she glanced back at it, even though I have seen salt and pepper shakers of Lot and his wife, and certainly she is just kind of looking back like that. The looking back that's meant here is looking back in sadness, missing the city, right? Longing for what was there, mourning over it. There's nothing to mourn over. Once God has determined something's good for destruction, done. You have to understand that from God's standpoint, from God's view, that's rebellion, right? Because to say that what God is doing is wrong, that's to say what God is doing is wrong. Even if you don't mean it that way, that's what's coming across, and that's the problem that we see here. So, continuing on. So she looked back and became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the valley. They looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. And so it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Now this part gets weird, and it's kind of gross, but there's a reason for it, for the stuff that comes through it. So now Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar because he was afraid that they were going to do the same thing. He doesn't want to be there again. So he lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. I could see him as like one of the first preppers, right? He's going to go and find a bunker to live in for the rest of his life. And the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there will not be a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth." Meaning, they're not going to have children. "So come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father." So they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father. And he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day, the firstborn said to the younger, "Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. And then you go and lie with him, that we may preserve our offspring from our father." So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him. And he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. Gross. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami, and he is the father of the Ammonites today. Both of which, as we're going to read later, are going to be a massive thorn in the side for the Jews. It's going to be a big problem going forward. Anyway, let's go into Nehemiah 4. Now, again, this is opposition to the work of them building the wall around Jerusalem, because they're rebuilding Jerusalem. First, we had in Ezra, they were rebuilding the temple, and now we're rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem. Now, when Sanballat, this is one of the people who lived near them, a regional leader, heard that they were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish it up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish, or the burned ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite was beside me, and he said, "Yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads, and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders." So, when we built the wall, and the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs and the Ammonites, same ones, and the Ashdodites heard that they were repairing, so that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward, that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry, and they plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. In Judah it was said, the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There's too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall. And our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. At that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. Basically, stop this work. Don't worry about it. Don't get killed, right? So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in the open spaces, I stationed the people by their clans, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. From that day on, half my servants worked on construction, and half held the spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. And the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon with the other. And each of the builders had his sword strapped at his side while he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. And I said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread, and we are separated on the wall, far from one another. There we go. Far from one another. In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we labored at the work. Half of them held the spears from the break of dawn until the stars came out. I also said to the people at that time, let every man and his servant pass the night within Jerusalem, that they may be a guard for us by night and may labor by day. So neither I, nor my brothers, nor my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us took off our clothes. Each one kept his weapon at his right hand. Matthew 13, 1 through 30. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. Since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. He who has ears, which basically means he who has ears to hear, let him hear. So people who have, it's not, everyone who has an ear, right? What it's saying is those who have the ability to understand this thing. Right. Then the disciples came to him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered them, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled. It says, you will indeed hear, but never understand. You will indeed see, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull. With their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of God, the word of the kingdom, and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what he has sown in his heart. This is what has been sown along the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. yet he has no root in himself. It doesn't mean anything. It sounds like a great thing, but it's not, grabbing deep into his soul. He's not willing to have it change his life at all, right? And so he endures it for a while, but when tribulation or persecution arise, on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. Indeed, he hears, he indeed bears fruit, and it yields, in one case 100-fold, another 60, and another 30. He put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? And he said to them, an enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? He goes, no. Lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them, but let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. These are the people who we see in the church. These are the term that I like to use the most is these are the let's call them false converts, right? These are people who come to your church. They may, raise a hand or, say the sinner's prayer. They may walk an aisle. They may do it with tears, right? But they, just like the people above, they're not really getting it. They may be excited about it, but their hearts aren't won to Christ. And because they're not really converted, their cares are still after the world. So they may still sit in a pew. They may go to Bible study. They may spend time with you. They may run a Bible study. They may teach at your church. They may be pastors. But really and truly, they're unsaved. So if they are plucked out, like when we see bad pastors exposed, what does it do? It wrecks a church, because there are people who are under that headship who thought, well, I thought this guy was an okay pastor. If I can't even discern that, then, am I really even a Christian? And whereas they may be real Christians, they're going to be thrown off by the whole thing. It's going to really confuse them. And then they're going to temporarily fall away. I'll put it that way. Also think about how many atheists who say, well, I was a super Christian. I was the number one top Christian. I memorized the entire Bible front to back. Ask me anything. I know it all. Debate me. And when you talk to these people, because I've talked to many of them, I used to be one, they will often tell you that the problem that they have with the church, the thing that they don't like about it, is the hypocrisy in it. Well, they're the hypocrites. They're the ones who are causing the problem. They are the chief hypocrites who are leading to all of these issues, because they were never really Christians to begin with, but they said they were Christians, and then they fell away when they walked away from their faith. See how that works? We're going to get into more in detail on that later, but the main thing to see here is that, and this is something that is mentioned even when Jesus comes back, when we get through like Matthew 28, not Matthew 28, Matthew 18, when we start going into the discussion. No, I think it's Matthew 24. See this? I'm having a day. I've had a very long day at work, so I apologize. But when he starts going into the things that are going to happen at the end of the age, I'm pretty sure it's Matthew 24. What will happen is we're going to see this mentioned again. And we're going to see that, like the You have two people grinding, and one person leaves and the other one's left behind. And people, especially in the age of left behindism and Tim LaHaye's kind of cinematic dispensationalism, people think that, oh, well, if you're left behind, then you must be a wicked person. Which one goes first? Gather the weeds first. Bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat in my barn. Which one goes first? The ones who Tim LaHaye's book left behind. All right, let's keep going. Acts. Let's get crack-a-lackin'. So, now those who were scattered because of the persecution that arose over Stephen traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, speaking the word to no one except Jews. But there were some among them, men of Cyprus and Cyrene. I've heard it said both ways, but I always say Cyrene, who on coming to Antioch spoke to the Hellenists also, preaching the Lord Jesus. And the hand of the Lord was with them, and a great number who believed turned to the Lord. And the report of this came to the ears of the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. And when he came, he saw the grace of God. He was glad, and he exhorted them all to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast purpose, for he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith. And a great many people were added to the Lord. So Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. And when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch. For a whole year they met with the church and taught a great many people. And in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. Christians basically means little Christ. And it was meant as an insult. You keep calling yourselves people who follow Christ. You're just Christians. You're just little bits of him. Kind of rude. I embrace it. So do most people. All right. Now, in those days, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them, named Agabus, stood up and foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine over all the world. This took place in the days of Claudius. So the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. And they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. About that time, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, they were like, yeah, kill these Christians. He proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread. When he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him over to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer for him was made by God to the church. And one of my very favorite stories is coming up here. We're going to see that tomorrow. It's amazing. So, all of that said, behold, the word of the Lord.